veld kom dit wyd gesmeer. Die lied van 'n volk se ontwaking, wat harte laat sidder en beef.
Ek smoeg vir die vrese waarmee ons moet lewe, vir guns en vir moord en vir rape. Ek smoeg vir die bad news, vir Zuma en sy views, van ons op TV moet kyk. Ek wil nie meer hoor hoe ons tieners begrawe, oor niemand hul steur aan die wet. Ek wil nie meer lees van affirmative action, of beklei om te hou wat ek het. Gee vir my 'n nuwe geit, 'n koers toe plesie en 'n tellery, wat liedjies sing en skryf en stry, oor die mooi van ons land en ons reg om hier te kan bly. Ek siek vir Malema, sy leuns en sy sê maar, ons hou maar ons mond en betaal. Ons kruip weg in kampe, word blind vir die rampe, en bid dat die Heer ons omhaal. Daar's Winnie Mandela, wat mense verbrand het, maar nou wil sy huil in haar hand. Die staatskas is leeg en die ANC jeug saai verwoesting en pyn deur ons land. Gee vir my 'n nuwe geit, 'n koers toe plesie en 'n tellery, wat liedjies sing en skryf en stry, oor die mooi van ons land en ons reg om hier te kan bly. Het betaal vir die grond, waar sy kinders se kinders kan bly. Maar sy huis en sy lande is nou in die hande van die vyand teen wie hy moes stry. Ons kinders verstaan nie, waar kom al vandaan nie, hul erfenis is uitgewis. Geen volkslied of vlag nie, en geen erewag nie, vir die helde wat daar nie meer is. Gee vir my 'n nuwe geit, 'n koers toe plesie en 'n tellery, wat liedjies sing en skryf en stry, oor die mooi van ons land en ons reg om hier te kan bly. Gee vir my 'n nuwe geit, 'n koers toe plesie en 'n tellery, wat liedjies sing en skryf en stry, oor die mooi van ons land en ons reg om hier te kan bly. En ons reg om hier te kan bly.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's edition of Radio Free South Africa on Resolution RDO Network, hosted by blogtalkradio.com. I am your guest host, Gertjan Zwiggelaar, born and partially raised in the Netherlands, born in Amsterdam, grew up for a time in Maastricht before coming to Canada, where I have spent most of my life, which has now been over 67 years. So I have spent a few years learning a few things, and I have come to understand a few things. And it's because of that my dear friend Karin Smith is continuing to trust me with doing this program for her, since she's still unable to attend to this herself, and I am highly honored to be continued to be trusted this way to handle such an important task. Radio Free South Africa is an important voice in raising awareness regarding the circumstances of people in South Africa, most particularly our own people, the descendants of the white Dutch Hollanders, the Boers, who came to South Africa and developed an untouched land. They were also, initially they were preceded by the Portuguese, but they did not consider that part of South Africa particularly of interest and chose to move up the east coast of Africa and set up their circumstances in Mozambique. But at any rate, initially the Boers, who set up a fort, a trading post, a place where they could victualize the increasing shipping that was rounding the Cape to do the mercantile enterprises that were beginning to proliferate in Southeast Asia, the exchange of goods, in Europe, goods coming from the Malay, Peninsula, from India, from China, from Sumatra and Bali and so on. And of course that spice trade, as you likely all know, that was such a lucrative trade in those days. The late 17th century, well, it started actually mid-17th century and then on up. Of course, the Huguenot people from France, to escape religious persecution there, brought their winemaking skills and vines with them as well. And so that was initially the development that accrued in South Africa. And we've spoken of this before. There were no black people there. There were no Negroes in that part of South Africa and Cape Town. Those people that were there, the white people, they initially contacted with light brown-skinned, very small, very tiny people, the Khoi and the San. The San are known as the Bushmen of the Kalahari, and the Khoi were called Hottentots. It was a bit of a derogatory term that was made up, Hottentots. It's because these people were very small and they were very guileless, and they're now collectively known as the Khoisan. And so we will talk about them at some more length as we go through. I have all kinds of interesting items that we want to discuss today, and certainly, of course, the news coming out of South Africa is not the least of that. That is actually at the top of my list, and so I will catch you up on some some stories that have come out of South Africa here within the last short while. But I'm going to play some music for you, not all my own. I've brought in some other talent, a group called Billy Talent, one of my favorite contemporary groups. And the song I've chosen to play for you is called The Suffering, which I thought was an appropriate title considering the amount of suffering that is going on in South Africa, and increasingly so. And that will, of course, will be more apparent to you when I go through the news. I have no new news regarding secession plans, and I will discuss about that. But I also want to discuss King Kuibaha Cornelius III's philosophy regarding the importance of agriculture over mining, and we'll share some anecdotes with you regarding that. I want to talk a little bit about cryptocurrencies, since that is actually an important investment consideration, and may very well be an opportunity for the burgeoning state, the attempt at a new state, the state of good hope, and so we'll talk about that. I want to talk at some length regarding the Jewish question, which in order to have a better overstanding, not just an understanding, but an overstanding of what has accrued in South Africa, the reasons why they have developed the way they have, and why South Africa is a very important canary in the coal mine for all white people worldwide. So we will discuss that because the Jews play a very important role there. I want to talk a little bit about Iceland today, and also I want to spend some time regarding what is the difference, millionaires, billionaires, and now trillionaires, and then it's important that we discuss some proactive action that we should definitely be beginning to consider and immediately start attending to. First of all, though, I just wanted to make an observation. The opening song that begins this program is sung in South Afrikaans, and it is a derivative of 17th century Dutch, the language that the Hollanders were speaking, with some additions of English, because of course the English are the other white group that set up shop, and indeed because they were so heavily infected with the Jewish virus, they set out to steal and very effectively at the cost of thousands of dead Boers and thousands of dead fodder, young English men who sought a life of glory in the army, wearing red. So they were like bright red jackets, the same color as what the RCMP, their ceremonial jackets are up here in Canada, that red serge. It's a very tightly woven wool. It's extremely warm. It's in fact not so comfortable. Looks great, and of course makes an excellent target. Bright red. Whoever thought to mark their soldiers? Well, yeah, they did that because those bright red jackets don't show blood. Obviously, when somebody is shot, that blood pools, but it's pooling red in a blood red coat. So it absorbed that red blood, and it was less demoralizing to the other soldiers. And it's the same reason why the English painted the inside of their gun decks of their warships, those wooden tubs, those gun decks were painted red on the inside. So again, it wasn't quite so demoralizing to see your friend's body splattered on the boards. Yeah, it was... When a ship returned, it's all very interesting because history is so amazingly interesting, and I do find it rather strange that so few people, in terms of the total population of the planet and percentages and so forth, really statistically the percentage of people that have a strong interest, an abiding interest, a passion for studying history, reading historic books, and contemplating historic ideas and so on, that it's just a wonder that more people are not that interested. And I think it is largely because they were turned off to that interest, to that curiosity in school, because most of the history lessons, as far as I remember them, they were not all that interesting because, first of all, the teacher didn't really have a passion for the subject, and secondly, the textbooks were so boring. And I think that's all by design, because they who know their history generally don't repeat much of it and do learn from history who in fact the enemy is and what historically has been done about that enemy. But we'll get into that in some more different detail. But what I was going to mention was that how that song is in South Afrikaans, and I do recognize some of the Dutch words in there and can make out some of the ideas that are in that song, even though I do not speak South Afrikaans or Afrikaans. Actually, it's just really I don't have to say South Afrikaans. I don't speak Afrikaans, and really, you must realize that it was the Hollanders who named that language Afrikaans. Afrikaans, that's a Dutch word that stands for the language of that area, and it is indeed quite a unique language, but I don't speak it. I can pick up bits and pieces, like I said, but I grew up in the Netherlands, and of course the Dutch language evolved there, but it didn't do the same evolution in South Africa. Just the same kind of story regarding French, the difference between the French spoken in France, through française, through the nose, nasal French, but of course many different dialects and accents throughout that large nation. But the language spoken by the people of Quebec is an older style French. And when they, Quebecois, say from the Lac Saint-Jean area, for example, the true, real Quebecois speaker, when he speaks his French in France, the French people, they recognize that as an older form. And there is a certain amount of snobbishness still amongst, and not just the French. That is a typical situation in Europe for those of you who are not aware of that, having not spent any time there or not having been born there. But there's a lot of class consciousness still there in Europe. In England, for example, class consciousness is very evident. And, a certain amount of snobbery. Well, that was one of the things that people tried to change when they developed the colonies in North America. They didn't want to bring those old prejudices with them over here and wanted to develop essentially a new way of living together. And indeed, in Montaigne's essays, Montaigne definitely observed that it was quite different how in North America, when he visited in the United States, the developing United States then, 18th century, Montaigne observed how rich and poor could speak with each other on a first-name basis, and really class distinctions were not so out front and in your face. And so, but anyway, just some interesting observations. So let's take a look at some news. Now, you have to realize that those newly tuning into Radio Free South Africa, and indeed South African news in general, one of the highest, well, in fact, likely the highest murder rate in the world is now in South Africa. And it's not just blacks murdering white people, but blacks murdering black people as well. It is, in fact, and again, it's a generality, but the generality is pretty general, that a murderous tendency is pretty significant, has a significant presence in the genetic makeup of the Negro. Indeed, of all human-looking beings on planet Earth, statistics show that Somalis, of everybody, are the most violent, prone, and indeed they are likely the closest, still chimeras, the hybridizations that were affected when they, likely the Anunnaki. Again, I wasn't there, but we do have some historic evidence regarding ancient times, but it's still pretty well covered up in dust and cobwebs by and large. We have but an inkling of the history that has developed here, or her story that has developed here on this planet. And I will share some of that information, some evidence that is coming to light and extremely well illustrated with photographs regarding beings and plants and such that existed here that were so phenomenally huge that you have absolutely no idea, and that will absolutely blow your mind. So tune into Radio Free Stratospherikus on Friday, same time, same network, Resolution RDO Network .com or blogtalkradio.com. And also at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So that's Radio Free Stratospherikus, and I will go into some more detail regarding more recent discoveries, also pertaining to some ideas about the actual form of the planet. And I may have to change my long-held ideas regarding that. Not that it really matters ultimately. What is the shape of the planet, and is there a dome, and so on and so forth? Are we on a flat plane? Ultimately, it really doesn't matter that much, because there's not much you can do about it, and here you are, and you are here now, and so really the question is, what are you going to do about that? And the rest of it you really have no control over. So, but it's all just very interesting, and I love speculative science as well as real true hands-on, in-your-face science, but it's also interesting to speculate about ideas and then, see how do those things fit in with other puzzle pieces that you have come across in your travels and your journeys through books and movies. Not to suggest movies are always telling you the truth, they're not, but stories, even novels, they do tell us something about ourselves, and there's oftentimes things that are revealed that are true and or worthy of consideration that may lead to some new ideas and awareness. So, but anyway, let's have a look at the news. The first one, and this is from HIN News, straight out of South Africa, and this is very new news. November. Okay, this was posted just recently, but it's from November the 2nd, 2017. It was initially preceded with a very graphic photograph, and I'm not exactly sure how I connected here, because I went scrolling through, which I always do, through lots of different news services, and there's links, and then there's this horrible photograph of a white man who had been tied to a railway track, and what was left of his upper body was in the photograph. So initially he had been completely cut in half. And and that led to an article about a reputable white Cape Town businessman whose head, his chopped off head, was finally found. And so that just to give you some idea of the sorts of things that are not abnormal in South Africa. It's not the sort of thing that we see here in Canada, at least not yet. There have not been any chopped off heads yet, other than the one I remember was this crazy Oriental chap on a Greyhound bus en route to Winnipeg, I believe it was in Manitoba, that this chap went crazy and cut off the head of a young man. I think his name was Tim. And just there he was sitting, and next thing, he's dead, his head's cut off. And a former student of mine, Garnet, he was on the bus, and he was essentially sitting right there. And this crazy creature did some cannibalism, apparently, on the remains of this young man, unfortunate young man. And Garnet was the chap who was interviewed by the news media shortly thereafter. I'm sure that, and I have never spoken with Garnet about this, as I'm not sure where he is. If ever any one of you know who Garnet is and you have contact with him, just let him know that I would be very interested to sit down and have a talk with him if he'd be interested. Garnet was a very dear student of mine, as so many of my students are. Golly, I have such good memories of my students. I was fortunate to teach some of the brightest young minds on the planet, and both, in all my 3 different places where I taught. But of course, the ones that I most remember, where I taught the longest, was in the city where I live now. Still, it's become home. It's a lovely place. Red Deer is absolutely a lovely, lovely place. And I taught at what was at one time the largest public high school, one of the largest public high schools in Alberta. I was Fine Arts Department head for a time, and during that period we had upwards of 2,500 students from grades 9 to 12 there. So it's like a small town, actually larger than a small town, because I've lived in one small town of 400 people and another one of 1,500 people. So yeah, that was our high school, Lindsay Thurber Comprehensive High School. It was hot. When I was teaching drama there, we averaged about 18 shows a year. I did that, kept that up for 5 years till I took over the art program. But anyway, news from South Africa. So yeah, so that's pretty gruesome, and that's typical and very dramatic, isn't it? So now let's have a look at another link I picked up today, and this is actually a more positive note. And this, I will just sort of place this in between. And so this is the killing of white farmers. So regarding the killing of white farmers, and this is HIN News from South Africa, and this is posted March 8th, 2017. And this is what the Zulu king Goodwill Zwelithini, Zwelithini, there he is. Goodwill Zwelithini, the Zulu king. He said some very good things, and so I will quote him, because you have to realize that there are black people who, they're not all cannibals anymore. I mean, there are Negroes that have evolved beyond that, and certainly some of the positive sort of influence of missionaries that have been there, spreading the word, that has caught on with some people. And, you do know that the Zulus are a very, very, they have a history, a very incredibly sanguine history of barbarity and bloodshed. And they have murdered their way south and are now pretty much the predominant tribe. But if these quotes are to be believed, it shows that there is some hope. So I quote, "If we are being honest with ourselves, these initiatives have failed to take us forward from our sad past. We tolerate rather than embrace each other. If someone has been called a monkey, that should shock the whole nation, not just black people, because such statements take us back as a nation. If a farmer is killed, there should be widespread condemnation of such acts, not only from white farmers, but from all of us, because the victim is a South African, irrespective of where he comes from." Well, that's very interesting that he said that, and it's unfortunate that people have said of some Negroes that they're monkeys, or perhaps monkey hybrids, but that's a big mistake, because monkeys are not simians. If anything, there is certainly hybridization that occurred, but it was with simian human DNA cross, not with the monkey crossing. So that's a bit of an error there. So anybody calling Negroes monkeys, they don't really know what the genetic story is. But you could certainly call them chimp hybrids or bonobo hybrids or gorilla hybrids or, baboon hybrids. I think those are the 4 simian breeds that are evident, physically evident in Negroes, if you are honest and you take a close look at them. Well, even you don't need to look that closely. And that's not the Negro's fault. That just happens to be the story. And so those with the huge behinds, they tend to be more of a baboon, I think, hybrid. And then the ones with the violent nature that are quickly steaming up to commit violence, those are the chimp hybrids. The gorilla hybrids and the bonobo hybrids, they tend to be the more passive ones, not overly interested in violence, but they can certainly be led towards that. And certainly we do know that they have been led towards the committing of all kinds of violence. But it is, according to Rowan Helper's amazing book, The Negroes in Negro Land, the propensity towards all kinds of strange diabolical behavior that is the typical behavior of the Negro. That is their genetic makeup. Indeed, the general IQ of African Negroes is about 75. North American Negroes, the average is around 85, and the average Somali has an IQ of 60. And these are figures that come out of another amazing book that if you haven't obtained this yet, I highly recommend you do so before it is banned. But it's J. Edgar Steele's incredible compilation of statistics and first-hand anecdotes and observations and so forth. It's called Defensive Racism, and I highly recommend it. It is a very well-written, well-researched piece of work, and it is my contention that that is one of the reasons that he was set up, framed for an attempt at murdering his wife. And his wife has totally disavowed all of that. J. Edgar Steele, a lawyer, in fact, was hauled off to jail, and he died there. And so they effectively murdered J. Edgar Steele for that book because it is actually very revealing, and it does throw also a lot of light on the Jewish question as well, if you pay attention. And so another piece of legislation, and this is the last piece that I want to cover, is that we have, the ratification of the land grab legislation, and the numbers were very significant. There was almost 300 votes to around 80 some votes. I think it was, and so that is now going to go ahead. Is the stealing of all white people's property with absolutely no recompense, and that is now the new government of Cyril Ramaphosa. And of course, Joseph Malema is heavily involved there as well. So it's there's some cabinet changes that have taken place there as well. But you know how it is. We have seen over 20 years of ANC rule in South Africa, and it is a very sad story of continual declining circumstances for everybody, including the blacks. But the story for white people there is absolutely horrific. And indeed, in a land that was created by their ancestors, we now have increasing numbers of all levels, skill levels, of profession levels, of employment levels, skill levels, all different levels of society. White people thrown out of work because of the legislations that made it more favorable and in fact necessary to hire black people over white people, even though the black people were not as capable. But that kind of legislation, affirmative action legislation, has resulted in huge refugee camps full of white people who are starving. They have absolutely drained all their resources, have sold off whatever property they could get some money for, and that's all gone. And so it is really important that those of you listening make sure you raise awareness about this. If you are at all concerned about your white brothers and sisters in South Africa, funding is this is the only way that we can somehow attempt to help these people better their circumstances and may live maybe a month or two more. But given the land grab without recompense legislation now being ratified with a huge majority, these black people, these Negroes, these descendants of interlopers, they're not even indigenous to the region. The indigenous people were the Khoisan and then the Afrikaners. There wasn't anybody there but them, and they developed all of that. And so these Negroes, that being naturally lazy and incapable of even inventing a plank, they want to steal everything. Because, white people, they do stuff. They build things. They invent things. And wherever they go, you have underground sewage systems, and you got sidewalks, and you got electricity, all of it. You got Beatles music that you can play on your CD player. And it's not anything that Negroes invented. The highest level of instrument that I believe Negroes invented in Africa is a drum. There was absolutely no really in Northern Africa, we see flutes, simple flutes, reed flutes, but drums essentially was the instrument of choice. Because and it's no different here in North America. The North American peoples that are not Aboriginals here, but the red-skinned Asiatics, that's all they can do is beat on drums, and then they yell, bang, 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 bang. It's not music. It's very when you listen to that for any length of time, it's quite mesmerizing. And it certainly, has a certain hypnotic quality to it, if that's what you enjoy. But there's certainly, when you compare that to, say, a beautiful oratorio by Johann Sebastian Bach, for example, well, huge difference there, hey? We're not all the same, and that is a fact. And so white people, don't ever let yourself be led into thinking that we are all the same. We're not, and it is so evident. But anyway, that's enough for now for news from South Africa. You can find it on the internet, and there's lots of news that is coming out of there, but for the most part it isn't really positive. And we're heading into very sorry circumstances regarding potable water in Cape Town. And pretty soon they're not going to have enough water to meet the demand. And so in addition to the increasing murder rates, there's going to come a battle for water also. And that doesn't sound very good. So therefore I have chosen a piece of music because I thought the title was appropriate. It's by Billy Talent. It runs just under 4 minutes. It's called The Suffering. National Socialism is the only political answer, the only political system developed by brilliant minds that has actually made sense and had positive results. Yeah, in a modern world. I have read Mein Kampf, the brilliant Adolf Hitler's amazing book, and I read that after I had already read copious, literally a library, well, not like a public library, but, a decent-sized pile of books pertaining to, human history, people's history, the history of peoples. I have books as I look to my right, of just about all the major cultures on the planet, from the Hittites on up. And, and I've read, all 8 volumes of Hodgkin's, the history of the barbarian invasions of the Roman Empire, for example. It's a huge pile of books. And, and The Hidden Hand by Ralph K. Epperson. And I've read The Controversy of Zion by Douglas Reed, and I'd read the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. Indeed, I'd done graduate studies in Marxism. Read a stack of books, including Marx's Das Kapital. My goodness, what an onerous tome that is. A lot of sophistry. My gosh, what a lot of what I call Marxist claptrap, but very effectively developed arguments, but oh my gosh, they are so long-winded, and it's the rabbinical tradition that Karl Marx grew up in. So, but anyway, I wanted to talk about the brilliant King Kuibaha Cornelius III, and a very kind, gentle man, the king of the Khoisan people, who has been hard at work trying to effectively secede pretty much half of South Africa in order to create a new country, a new nation, the State of Good Hope, the sovereign State of Good Hope. And he realized that the people who are the communists, and communists being, well, communism is a philosophy, a political economic system that was developed by Jewish minds. It's totally Judaism, Talmudism, communism. It's really, there is not much distinction. It's all the same idea. The enslavement of most everybody but a small elite who believes itself to be God and brighter and smarter and chosen by God to take control of this planet. Well, the king wants to secede from those people and create this new nation where Jews and Negroes are not welcome. Only white people and Khoisan people, people of goodwill, Oriental people he doesn't have an issue with, and East Indian descendants, perhaps not the Guptas, but there are lots of Oriental, Malay, and East Indian people descendants there, because South Africa is really the first multicultural experiment, the first real rainbow nation, which Canada is quickly becoming, and ultimately has now resulting in a whole lot of problems, and quickly accruing in a similar direction in Canada as it has in South Africa. So the king wants to secede, break up that nation, and leave behind the gold, the diamonds, and the other precious stones that are in that northern eastern area, and and the Transvaal area, people say, well, why would you do that? I mean, my goodness, gold and diamonds. I mean, isn't that, everybody's best friend? But the king realizes that you can't eat that stuff. You cannot live off that stuff. Indeed, the future lies with agriculture. And he is well aware, and for those of you who are not aware of this, but surveys of the Kalahari Desert that have been made from outer space using, special radar and X-ray technologies that can look through layers of sand and dirt and so forth. And what they've discovered is that the Kalahari Desert was not always a desert. In fact, at one time it was a very, very dense agricultural area where very complicated and very intense and huge what they call it, irrigation systems existed there, canals and sluiceways and dams and the whole shebang. And so it is highly possible to reclaim that desert and return it to its incredible potential as an agricultural, as a place to produce plants that we can eat and we can use for medicine. And so, in case he hasn't thought of this, but I will put it in this story now. Some marijuana seeds from British Columbia were sent to South Africa and planted in a salubrious place. And within 6 months, those seeds produced 15-foot marijuana trees. In fact, marijuana and bamboo are the two fastest growing plants. You can literally watch them grow. And in the case of cannabis hemp, King Kuhibaha, if he hasn't thought of this, but I suspect he has, because worldwide there is an increasing move towards considering medical marijuana as an alternative to the pharmaceutical products, which in some cases can be very detrimental to people. Statistics for North America show that somewhere in the neighborhood of 300,000 people a year succumb to misdiagnosis, and by doing so taking the wrong medicines or taking too many different medicines that interact negatively with each other, or people overdosing on medicines. But it's a staggering number of people that succumb, that die, which that would never happen if they were using marijuana for their medicine, and it is very effective and has proven to be so, and has been proven to be so for thousands of years. But the Jews who control the pharmaceutical industry, don't like the idea of people being able to easily self-medicate. Indeed, prior to 1937, 85% of pharmaceuticals were derived from cannabis hemp, and the remaining 15% came from coca leaves and from opium poppies. And so in the case of cannabis hemp, it was used for pain medicine. It was used as a glaucoma medicine. It was an asthma medicine, because what it does, the marijuana smoke opens up the air passages in the lungs and has, in fact, the opposite effect to tobacco, which tends to constrict the air passages. And so if you are a tobacco smoker, it is highly recommended that you do smoke some marijuana from time to time, just to help your lungs expectorate the crap that accumulates because of the constriction of your air passages from the tobacco, from whatever chemicals that do that are in tobacco smoke. It's also interesting if you note that, when you smoke tobacco in a room, if tobacco is smoked in a room, eventually everything in that room smells of that tobacco smoke, and it stays there forever. Books, indeed, where, let's say, somebody who has a library of books and they smoke tobacco quite a bit in there. Let's say, the average smoker consumes about a package of cigarettes a day. Well, eventually everything reeks of that tobacco smoke. But if that person smokes marijuana, and some of us do that, and there is no lingering smell that's left behind. So that's also very interesting about marijuana smoke. But given the interesting or the increasing interest in medical marijuana, the fact that South Africa has the growing conditions to produce such mighty plants, cannabis plants, there is a potential agricultural windfall to be realized there that could make that nation, the Free State of Good Hope, a very wealthy place indeed. And so, I am very positive and supportive of this attempt. And I do recognize that if people do not get behind that there in South Africa, there could very well come a significant bloodbath as the Negroes of the ANC and their minions start clearing the land of white people and taking everything that they own. And so really it is extremely important that you consider sending funds to help alleviate the increasingly onerous circumstances of our white brothers and sisters, their children. Oh my gosh, it really, truly, it's so tragically sad. And you can funnel funds through the website for Radio Free South Africa. So that's radiofreesouthafrica.com. And Karin Smith has set up a PayPal account where money can be channeled. And so make sure that you indicate where it is that you want your funds to go. So if it is to help alleviate the plight of the squatters, the white squatters, then write in the subject line or your memo Relief Fund. And so that goes to the South African Family Relief Project that is headed by Leah Dupre. If you wish to send money to help King Kuibaha Cornelius III and the Khoisan people to effect the secession of that part of South Africa and to realize the United State or the Free State, the sovereign state of Good Hope, just put Good Hope in your memo, and Karin will funnel that money there. And then in the event that you feel that Karin is deserving, and she certainly is, because the medical bills that are piling up for her family is so onerous. It is really a wonder to me that the people of the United States, of the Jew-United States, have put up this long with an absolutely ridiculous medical support system that has been figured out by pretty well all other nations, and certainly up here in Alberta. My gosh, we are well taken care of by the medical system here. I don't abuse it. I see my doctor, who is South African and a dear friend. I changed from a dark-skinned doctor who almost killed me or made me blind with Vioxx and prednisone for fibromyalgia, which the mother of my fabulous son, she is a natural healer, and she had me healed from fibromyalgia with herbal concoctions within about 3 months, I think, and I don't suffer from that issue. It's essentially a heavy metal poisoning, and oral chelation is certainly a significant part of the program to get rid of it. And so, if you do have that, or people suffering from fibromyalgia, if you want to contact me, you certainly can do so. Just go to my website, stratofuricus.com, and just ask for the information, and I'll give you the list of the stuff that she had me on and I'll try and see if I can find it. I've written it down somewhere, but I think I can pretty well remember it. And once you kind of take a look at it, it's kind of in a way sort of self-evident as to what you need to do. But medical doctors will generally tell you that it's incurable. What I like about my South African doctor, and that is an experience I've had with South African doctors in general up here now. I haven't had a lot of them, and I'm not a sickly individual, so I don't see doctors all that much. But I do get a sense that they practice medicine somewhat differently than the doctors, at least other doctors that I've had. I think it's the South African doctor tends to listen to his patient more, his or her patient more, and does listen to ideas and directions the patients may present. So they're not quite so top down. It's a much more consultative, man on man, woman on woman, or you get my drift. It's just they do have in my case, my doctor, and he and I are friends, so we're on a first name basis in the privacy of the consulting room, of course. But he's Dr. Klaassen to the nurses and staff, as far as when I refer to him, obviously. But he is my friend, and I'm very glad that he's my doctor. His name is Cornelis. And that's wonderful about the South African, the Boers there, how they have these old Dutch names. It's really, really interesting, and it's wonderful. And and he and I, we kind of open up our conversation generally in Afrikaans, our greetings, and then, and of course the rest is all carried on in English. But anyway, so that was my chat regarding what King Kui Baha is planning, and I think that's brilliant because eventually people will maybe realize that diamonds are almost as common as sand, so why spend all that money on that stuff? I mean, it's a good industrial product, and and gold and all of it, it's just baubles. But agriculture, food, and medicine, that's where the future lies, and I think they're going to create a very wealthy nation there once. But again, it needs funding, so please do consider that. Can't do anything without money. A note about cryptocurrencies, if you haven't looked into that yet, there will come a time when I can sit Fusion Phil down, my friend who I have watched develop a passion for cryptocurrency, indeed a young man who has a great interest in things technological, and he is very knowledgeable about cryptocurrencies. It is definitely something that you might want to consider investing in. Not necessarily Bitcoin, but wouldn't hurt to put a few dollars there and perhaps some money in Ethereum and take a look at a few other ones and then just watch them, go up and down. But the ultimate total direction is up as more and more even nations are taking an interest, and indeed there are nations, I believe Iran being one of them, China another, that are developing their own blockchain technologies to develop cryptocurrencies, because really ultimately bottom line, when you think of it, the entire banking industry is electronic. I mean, money is shuffled around in the blink of an eye electronically from one system to another, investments here and there. So let's say an investment bank throws $1 billion into a pile, and it sits there for a few seconds basically, and it generates a blip up interest. Well, that blip is literally millions of dollars profit, and boom, instantly it's shift off somewhere else. So it's all, money really is basically all electronic anyway. You have some vestiges, some remnants of an older system which you still use day to day for transactions, but it is kind of what do they call that? It's just something that was left over from a past time. Everything is moving towards. But the problem with putting everything into an electronic format is if somebody pulls the switch, you see. And so, artifacts, that's the word I was looking for, artifacts. Like money, is an artifact. It's now, like I say, good idea. Do consider. But it's also wise, do have some physical gold and silver also, because gold has maintained its value since the Middle Ages pretty well as we can trace it. And silver is the most important industrial metal on the planet. So, that the need for silver will never go away. And it is, in fact, continuing to rise in value as well. So that's it about that. Now, talking about all of that, money, of course, we do know that wherever there is the clink of shekels, the nose of the Jew sniffs it out very quickly. He can hear them shekels with his nose and with his big ears, and he feels it through the hairs on his skin. Shekels, that is their total focus is material, the material world, material goods, and money, buys them all of that. Can't buy you love, but it can certainly buy you a new Ferrari. And a lot of Jews don't really have to work very hard. Indeed, due to the incredible Shoah business they created at the end of the Second World War, they receive huge amounts of money on a yearly basis, which is doled out. And the average Jew in Fortress Rothschild, I've read this in several sources, but I'm not there, and I haven't actually spoken with any Jews about this. But it does kind of make sense given the billions and billions and billions of dollars that go there every year. That on average they make about $50,000. That's just kind of paid to them. Then if they wish to do something to make a little extra money, that's okay. But if they don't, $50,000, they live pretty good. So they can pretty well do what they want, and killing, children and shooting pregnant women through the belly, and they can drive over people with tanks, bulldozers. Remember Rachel Corrie. Always remember Rachel Corrie, standing there bravely trying to prevent some Jew driving a massive bulldozer, something like a D12. This thing is like a fortress on treads. Yeah, drove over her twice, back and forth. He's never been charged. He's never been held accountable because murder of Goyim, that's prescribed in the Talmud. So the Jew was just doing what a good Jew does. And they say in the Talmud that the best of the Goyim should be murdered. Yeah, so the best of the Goyim. Iceland is an interesting country because they only have about 200 to 300 Jews living there in a population of about 350,000 or so. And they've kicked nasty banksters out, and they've put a bunch of politicians in jail. Only 200 to 300 Jews. My goodness, that's a very interesting number. That's and given that people are waking up worldwide, becoming ever more Jew conscious and knowledgeable about their malfeasance over the last 3,000 years. I mean, even the Romans had trouble with them. They're always causing problems, and it was because of that Pontius Pilate tried to avoid another revolution, another insurrection, another pile of bloodshed because of Jewish troublemaking, that's why Jesus ended up on a cross. Just that to appease the foaming at the mouth Jews. They weren't called Jews back then, by the way. If you didn't know that, the word Jew didn't come into the English lexicon until about the 17th century, and it's actually a word that basically is like a burlap sack in which you put a whole bunch of different human-looking creatures, and this one is a Pharisee, and then this one is let's say an Ashkenazi, Pharisee, Ashkenazi, and then this one is a Sephardic, and then this one is a black as coal Ethiopian Jew. The other Jews, the white-skinned Jews, most Jews are actually Ashkenazis, and they originate in Khazaria. But now there is some contention about that. But gosh, the evidence is pretty conclusive, it seems to me. But again, I could be persuaded otherwise with evidence. I know David Duke doesn't agree with me, but gosh, I read Arthur Kessler's book, The 13th Tribe, and I've looked into the sort of the history, and I've read, like I said, a lot of books. I did mention a few of them. If you're interested in a very good bibliography, it's 2 pages. It forms part of my handbook. It's by under the pseudonym Emmanuel Truthseeker. It's a publication of Truthseeker Institute, and it's called A Handbook for the Righteous, or How to Beat the Unrighteous at Their Own Game. Now, this is not an inexpensive publication. It's self-published. You could obtain it as a PDF through my website, stratofuricus.com, and it's well worth it. It has a very interesting the bibliography is worth the price alone. But just go there and order information. It's all there. You can order it and use PayPal as the way to exchange the monetary requirement. But that thing has circulated fairly widely throughout my province here, and has gone to England, to Germany, to Australia, to the United States. It's a universally applicable, let's say, essay regarding the history and philosophy of law, and I've tested the information myself in courts. Indeed, in my own case, I took something up 5 appearances up to provincial court and beat a $13,500 fine and the potential 60 days in jail. It looks like somebody's trying to call me here, so I'm going to have a look and see. This is new, and I'll see if I can figure out how to do this. Hang on. Hello? Hello? Are you there? Hello? Somebody's calling me. Hello? Yeah. Hello? Oh, let's try this button. Hello? Are you there? I'll try this button. This is all new to me. Hello? Somebody calling from 504-1982. Hello? Oh, maybe this button. No. Well, I don't know exactly what's going on here, and so I'm afraid I'm going to have to just discontinue this attempt, because all I'm hearing is static on the line. But whoever it is that's trying to call in, hopefully we can solve these technical problems at some point in the near future, and we can get this thing happening. But I apologize that this is not happening now. So anyway, I'm going to press the hang up button, and so that we can continue on with this radio show. Anyway, so what is the next thing I wanted to do was to play one of my very favorite songs by one of my favorite bands from the 1960s. Now, for those of you who know me, yeah, you could probably guess the band. But if you don't, here it is. This is from probably one of the most revolutionary albums ever produced in that period, and that was Revolver. And the song is Here, There, and can you guess what song followed that one? I'll leave that up to you. Think about it. See if you can remember, and if you remember the album Revolver. Oh gosh, I played that and played that and played that. I had that original album, but I don't know whatever happened to that. So much of my stuff from when my childhood and my teen years just sort of disappeared. Brothers, younger brothers, obviously. Oh, and a real stupid, I think I was about 12 or 13, stupid trade I made with a stack of comic books for a little, one of those little Morse code tapping little units, that people used back in the turn of the last century before the last one. That's how they communicated before telephones. But anyway. So now here we are in a situation worldwide where the Jews are hard at work trying to exterminate the white people, the white race, and they're doing it everywhere. In South Africa, the Jews are behind the whole ANC thing. They totally were behind getting that little vermin, murderous slimeball cockroach Nelson Mandela in there, and eventually as president of South Africa. They're the ones that control world media. They're the ones that made everybody think that apartheid was this horrible practice, when in fact it was a really good thing. And even blacks will admit that. Those that are honest will admit that. That they were better off under apartheid when everybody was able to have their own smelly kraals, where they could do their own mumbo jumbo juju and witchcraft and whatever, could have smelled them from a mile or more away, but that's their cultural practice, and it was allowed under apartheid. But once the ANC came in and apartheid was dismantled, well, it is really a sad story now that there are something like 40 million Negroes pitted against just under 4 million whites. It's not really a fair fight, but it is heartening to know that there are white people starting to take action, and indeed there are training camps springing up. White youth are lining up to join and learn how to lock and load and shoot and aim small and shoot effectively, not wasting time on a trial afterwards. If you're going to shoot somebody, you have a reason to shoot them because they're trying to rape your wife or your daughter, or they're trying to, burn your house or whatever. You don't shoot to maim, you shoot to kill, and so you have to learn just to aim small and know where to hit. So, you get these crazy people that are running around with flak jackets on, but their heads exposed. Well, a bullet put there definitely does a very good job at scrambling the bad ideas that are in the brain of that individual, trying to, murder you. Oh, the type of murders that take place, the incredible hatred that is displayed, the horrible practice of the juju, for example. Oh my goodness, in some cases it takes days before somebody is finally mercifully dead, having been drilled with electric drills and, oh my gosh, nails, fingertips cut off, you name it. These creatures are not human, so we have to stop thinking of them in those ways. Now again, it's a generality and there is always exceptions, but overall there is a horrible hatred that has been stirred up amongst the Negroes, and that's all because of Jewish media stirring them up. And then of course they've all been fed American television, live vision, or Talmud vision, as some people call it, where Negroes are shown the circumstances of Negroes in North America, the Jeffersons, for example, people living high, living wealthy, and they're Negroes, and these Negroes in Africa, they look at that, they go, holy moly, here I live in little more than a beaver house, on a mud floor in a house with no windows. Well, the reek, they don't notice that somehow. Just like cattle, they don't notice that they're standing in their own excrement. They don't really seem to make much of a fuss standing ankle deep in urine and whatever. So it's really not much different. And indeed, the Bible refers to them as talking beasts, for example. But again, those that were lucky enough to have some, Irish DNA thrown their way when the Irish were miscegenated with Negroes in North America, those that got a good portion of that DNA, they generally are a bit better off. But the ones that got it on the slave ships with the Jewish sailors and so on, because you realize that all those ships, those slave ships, were totally manned by Jews, right from the captain down to the sailors. All Jews. And of course, some of the Negro women, can be very physically attractive, and I'm sure that there was lots of hanky-panky that went on there, and so Jews infected these Negroes with their psychopathy. It is in fact identified that Jews have over 200 identifiable psychopathies, and schizophrenia is a very predominant one, and part of, or a manifestation, or let's say a symptom of schizophrenia is extreme paranoia. And Jews are extremely paranoid. They think everybody hates them. But anybody with a conscience, anybody with a modicum of knowledge regarding the Jewish question can't help but get there. I mean, that hatred is a word that is used as a weapon, and it is not politically correct to hate, but it is a word that describes extreme revulsion, a total repulsion, a feeling of abhorrence of something that is so vile, so foul, so horribly evil, that is that extreme emotion, and that is the word we use to describe that. You can't just say, oh gosh darn, I just sort of feel not really comfortable about the fact that Jews murdered over 100 million, white Christian Russians in the former Soviet Union, for example. Oh gosh, I just dislike those people a little bit, kind of, sort of, because they murdered, millions of Armenians, literally nailing, Armenian Christian girls to crosses. Oh yeah, well, I'm not, I'm not supposed to feel, too horribly badly about the fact that millions of Ukrainians were starved to death in the Holodomor, all at the behest of Jews. No. Once you actually start really thinking that through, what they've done and what they still continue to do, now the latest revelations coming out of Hollywood, Mel Gibson revealing that it's common practice there, the drinking and drinking the blood and eating babies. Oh, yeah. The Harvey Weinstein, what's his name now? Harvey, movie producer. Oh, that's typical behavior. Our white girls are called shiksas, and they're just meat. They're just little animals in human skin with vaginas and tits, and they don't care. Jews don't care whether they're married or not. Doesn't matter. Everything foul and reprehensible, and then we're not supposed to use the word hate. Well, I think that's nonsense. I absolutely abhor. I hate them for what they have done and what they continue to do. And they have so much chutzpah, they have so much hubris that they think they're collectively God. Well, we true sons of God have to start now straightening our backs and start to take some overt action. It isn't that we were taught to be wimps. That is what Saul of Tarsus, the so-called Saint Paul. Everybody bought into his preaching, but he was not an apostle. He didn't know Jesus personally, and he created a religion, Christianity, which now has resulted in over 40,000 different sects, all quibbling over motes and ticks. No cohesive Christian army, no cohesive army of the sons of God, and subsequently the minions of Satan. They have now taken pretty significant control of everything. So unless you all want to continue sliding down this roller coaster to perdition, then just stay on the track you're on and don't do anything. But if you really want to put the brakes on and do not accept the sophistry of the rapture and that we all have to go dancing into the flames, Muslims would like to see you do that. They, in fact, torched a church full of Christians somewhere in the east. I think it was somewhere in Indonesia just recently. Yeah, but that's what they're taught in the Quran. They want to see unbelievers go up in a pavilion of flames. But it's all a ridiculous idea. That's not something that the Father wants to see happen here. And so it is incumbent upon the sons of God to rally now and seriously start addressing this Jewish question, because they are responsible for all of it. They opened the gates to Europe in the 15th century in Venice when they unleashed bubonic plague infected rats and wiped out 30% of the European population. Now they've opened up the gates and they are letting in human-looking rats that are infected with diseases of the body. They're crawling with bugs, and they're infected with the Muslim hive mind virus, and with a low IQ and violent propensities. Now statistics in France indicate that 1 in 8 women have been raped there now. And that's largely because of these so-called refugees that have come there on these boats. I mean, where are they getting all this money for these massive, expensive pontoon boats and all of this, these cell phones they're carrying, and they're supposed to be refugees? Or where are the women? Where are the children? It's just men, all fighting-aged men. Well, it is an invading force, and the Jews have opened the gates to that. Look at that Jew cunt, Angela Merkel, for example, the disgusting angel of death, that piece of human. It's not even human. That it can't be. She hates the German people. She's the exact antithesis of Adolf Hitler, and she really is a traitorous, treasonous vermin that needs to be immediately incarcerated. Take Monica Schaefer out of that solitary confinement unit in the maximum security prison and stick Angela Merkel in there and throw 3 black women in with her, just like they did with Monica recently. A cell for 4, there's 2 white women, and they threw in 3 Nigerian women. Yeah, well, that's how Jews operate. And it's time, it really is time. Call the enemy what he is. And they don't like that. They don't. But you've got to learn that what they preach, what they mythologize to be their history, and so forth. That you have to learn how to argue all of it. I mean, they're well trained in their Talmud Torah schools, to argue the Jewish position, and then convoluted discussions and what have you. And so it's really important that white people arm themselves with the truth. Learn the history of the Jew, learn of all their arguments, and know how to counter-argue them, so that the truth can be put on the table and they can no longer try to obfuscate everything with their lies. Because you got to realize that their father is the king of liars, and so you can never trust them, no matter whether they call themselves Messianic Jews or they're Jews for Palestine or whatever. It's all part of the story. They are totally into what we call a controlled opposition, and there's a lot of it out there. Controlled opposition, because they think that they've got us all by the short and curlies anyway. Doesn't matter anymore what you know. But more and more truth is coming out about what they do. And then you wonder, why are there so many thousands of children that go missing every year? I think in Canada the number was, I read it in 2 locations some years ago, but there's around 67,000 children that go missing. And, in a population of 37 million, that's easily done. Not all those children are returned to their parents. And since we now know that the Jews do, in fact, feed off the blood and the organs and so forth. In fact, Israel is the largest, next to China, largest organ harvesting place on the planet. So lots of Palestinian children disappear, and then the body is returned devoid of all the organs, rudely stitched up and returned in a body bag to the parents. That routinely goes on there, well documented. And so, I can't help but get to that repulsive, kind of emotion, that emotion that just, makes me hate with such a passion. But it's not just reserved for the Jews. It's also reserved for their war dogs, the Muslims, who are extremely dangerous. I've read their Quran 4 times in the preparation for a book on the Quran, which you can also obtain through my website, stratofericus.com. And all the information pertaining to that is there. And so, if you are interested to learn what is in that book of horrors, go there to my website and consider purchasing that book. Any purchases that you make of materials of mine, whether you're interested in any of my paintings that you will see displayed in the gallery, give it a moment to load because it's huge. There's a lot of material there. If there's any paintings in there that you like to purchase, just contact me. But I will donate a percentage of everything that's purchased to the South Africa Family Relief Project. And so I promise 50%. And so, that's another way you can do some of the fundraising is just buy some stuff for me. Then you'll actually have something that you can enjoy, perhaps some of my music or some of my writings, whatever. So there's that part. So we'll take a little break. I have something else queued. This time it is something that I composed, and it's called I So Love the Harp. It's 6 minutes, 22 seconds. So here we go. Yeah, so love the harp. I play that a harp quite a bit in my music. It features beautifully in the Yellow Concerto, the Yellow Rhapsody, and other places. I think I got a harp featured quite well. There's a horn, English horn, and harp concerto that I remember composing. Gosh, I've got so much music that I've put together that it's hard to remember them all. But they're all cataloged. There's 24 CDs of original content that's available through my website. And the color rhapsodies, there's 7 of them, and it's 3 CD sets. And they're beautiful looking CDs, and the music is actually quite astounding. But anyway, I just wanted to give you guys another quick advertisement, and then we will move on with a little bit more yakety yak, and perhaps I might still be able to squeeze in another little piece of music. And so here's one.
To the Ayatollahs of Iran and every terrorist you enable, listen up. You might have met our fresh-faced flower child president and his weak-kneed Ivy League friends, but you haven't met America. You haven't met the heartland, where the people will defend this nation with their bloody, calloused, bare hands, if that's what it takes. You haven't met the steel workers and the hard rock miners or the swamp folks in Cajun country who can wrestle a full-grown gator out of the water. You haven't met the farmers, the cowboys, the loggers, and the truck drivers. You don't know the mountain men who live off the land or the brave cops who fight the good fight in the urban war zones. No, you've never met America, and you ought to pray you never do. I'm the National Rifle Association of America, and I'm freedom's safest place.
Oh yeah, again, I repeat, an armed society is a civil society. I'm all about open carry. I think it's absolutely insane that people here in Canada have allowed themselves to be disarmed as much as they have. But again, people still continue to believe in government. I mean, government essentially is a disease of the mind. The vector of this disease are politicians, and the nucleus are Jews. It's a fact. What good do politicians actually do? I love the idea expressed by a joke. It says politics. What's politics? Well, poly, it's a word that means many, and ticks are blood-sucking vermin. That's politics. Excuse me. Always beware of people seeking public office, because they have a vested interest in something. They have an agenda. Yeah. So I don't give politicians a lot of credence. I don't find, in general, politicians have done me a lot of good. So I'm all for more localized governments, communities governing themselves, and but these onerous federal governments, these massive, weighty institutions where a huge number of individuals who think they're very important just basically sit there warming benches and do very little. Well, they think they do a lot. They I don't know, what do? They write a lot of words on paper that are talked about. Nothing goes anywhere. And the overall plight of the people continues to slide downward. And the Jews seem to be better and better off, and continue to involve us in wars from which their banksters make a ton of money, and their pharmaceutical industries make a ton of money, administering medicines to the soldiers that are injured or, suffer post-traumatic stress syndromes and need all kinds of psych medicines and treatments. And Oh my gosh, if we could just shake them off. There are 110 places worldwide that shook them off, through their history, more recent history, say, since the year 1000, say, from then on, about, well, some earlier times too, but, there's on record about 110 places that have kicked them out once they knew what they were up to, and that's just what the Germans were trying to do. National Socialist government was simply trying to get them out of the country and get them out of all these positions of control and power in banking and education and government, in the media, all those important enterprises that are heavily infected by Jews in such a huge number that it's really odd, considering they're only about 2% or less of the world's population, and yet they control so much that affects us and is causing our premature demise. I mean, their chemtrail programs, their fluoridation programs, the pharmaceuticals that kill people, when they had Vioxx on the market, I mean, that gave lots of people sudden heart attacks. So Vioxx killed a lot of people. Prednisone made people blind. When are we going to say enough is enough as a planet? We could make the planet number 111. It is possible. While we're at it, we need to seriously address this Muslim problem as well. Again, they do have this strange belief system that practices misogyny, and it believes that a really good Muslim is someone who kills a lot of unbelievers, and they can't just kill them, they have to torture them to death. Pavilions of flames and the scourge of Allah. Oh boy, and the things they do to the women and how they treat women, it's pretty tragic, Man can have 4 wives, he can have as many concubines as he can afford, and then he can still have more pussy, on the side when he's traveling. So much for fidelity, to a woman. Just a very strange. I've never seen Muslims really cuddling with each other. And there's not a lot of that sort of affection. But then you've got to have an empathy gene to have, a feeling, towards the expression of affection, and you have to have an empathy for another human being. Well, that's something we white people seem to express quite a bit, and I don't see that so much reflected in other groups. I've never really seen Orientals all that cuddly, and I've not seen, Negroes, that's just a whole different story there, when you actually consider the traditional practices of the Jews, for example, when they get married, the woman has to shave her head, make a wig of her hair. Then just before the consummative act is performed, he shaves her pubic hair really roughly, and then she must dry herself out with a cloth. Well, I can't imagine her being moist at this point anyway. But and then it has to be all done dry and with violence. That's that's pretty sick. That's really sick when you think about that. And it's not very affectionate, is it? And of course, the Jewish man can have on the side, and that's fairly common practice. So that's not particularly frowned upon in that group either. And so that's another part of the story, the Jewish question. What are they? Are they actually human beings, or are they some kind of an alien infestation? I think that the latter is likely the case, and that they are some kind of an alien infestation, and their hand is heavy on South Africa, and South Africa is now suffering horribly, and I lay it, all of that directly in their laps. And so really, truly, it is time for white people to stand up to them and to really start affecting the nasty work of ridding the planet of this parasitical entity. They have done us a lot of harm. They've murdered a lot of people. In fact, look at what they've done to my friend Monica Schaefer. You know, she expressed in a YouTube video that went viral the truth about the Jewish take on the events of the Second World War, and of course she's smart and she's done her research. She and her brother Alfred, who is my friend, with whom I do a radio show Friday mornings at 8 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, and that's on EuroFolkRadio.com, and that's Down the Rabbit Hole with Gertjan, Alfred, and Andy, the Andrew Carrington Hitchcock. And so we three do a show on Fridays together, and his sister and he made this video. It went viral, where she basically apologizes to her deceased mother, how she, Monica, was wrong about the Holocaust, having bought into the official myth that was perpetrated through the public fool system, where she, in Canada, where she went to school and was indoctrinated, but she is no longer. But having done that, you know, she unfortunately made the mistake of going into a courtroom to listen to Sylvia Stoltz's trial in an inquisition there, and in Germany, and 3 armed thugs, agents of the federal government, seized her and shackled her, handcuffed her, hauled her off to solitary confinement, essentially for thought crime. It's insane. Anyway, we are nearing the end of this program, this edition of Radio Free South Africa on Resolution RDO Network and blogtalkradio.com. Thank you all for tuning in and listening, and I apologize to whoever it was that tried to phone in. Again, sometimes things work and sometimes they don't, and we'll try and figure that out, so don't lose heart. I apologize that that was kind of the way it worked out, but I do appreciate you for making the attempt. My prayers go out to Karin Smith, and I hope that her circumstances will improve. I wish you all the very, very best, and do please consider sending some funds. Do it through PayPal. RadioFreeSouthAfrica.com.